Hey everybody, what is going on? Hexlex here with another Master Duel video for you guys. Today we're going to be doing our last metagame analysis for Season 4. It'll be our kind of like our Season 4 wrap-up here. As we're going to be talking about how the meta is going to change kind of moving forward, not only going into this first week of Season 5, but also the banlist right afterward, which we can see the changes are going live. Oh, I thought it was May 8th, but I guess it's going to be May 9th here as well. I did have a video covering those. If you haven't seen them somehow just yet, if you've been living under a rock, then you can go ahead and check those out, or you can just briefly read the changes here as well. So Master Duel Meta did put a very apt little warning here that, with the banlist coming up, especially in the coming weeks, the metagame is going to change very rapidly. So, these deck lists that are being shown in these deck breakdowns here are not necessarily going to be optimal deck lists moving forward after the ban list, or necessarily even legal ones, depending on the deck. And furthermore, the meta itself is going to shift very significantly. Well, relatively speaking. So, it's pretty obvious with the list that there's not like a whole lot that got hit really hard. Probably the closest things that got hit hard, or the things that got closest to getting hit hard, were Drytron and Eldlich, with some of their key cards getting limited. But even then, I think the power levels, and I think most people kind of agree with this, are going to be mostly about where they were before. But, if you're asking, are the deck's power levels going to be, or what are the deck's power levels going to be after the ban list goes live, versus what is the meta going to look like after the ban list goes live, those are actually two very different questions. Now you might be thinking, well, but power is directly correlated with where the deck is on the tier list. How are they different? Well, the power, if we remember, as this little description down here says, is compiled from decks that are seeing top tournament and ladder play. But the decks that are seeing play are going to be affected based on players' perception of what is strong or not during the tier list. That is going to influence, especially during the first couple of weeks after the ban list goes live. That is going to be far more influential than the actual power level of the decks themselves, is what people perceive their power levels to be. Now again, you might be thinking, okay, but aren't you just splitting hairs? What's the actual difference there? I'll give you a key example here. Something that's really easy to think, but is actually may not be true once you look at it a little bit further. So you look at all the cards that got semi-limited, right? You see like, oh, what's up with Tri-Brigade only getting one card hit to 2? Like one fractal, that's all they lose? That's practically nothing. Whereas Adamancipator's down here in tier 3, and they lost 3 cards. They lost an Analyzer, they lost a Roxy's, and they lost a Sekka's Light. Wow, Adamancipator got hit way harder than Tri-Zoo. That's like what I call a level 1 thought process, right? Is like, oh, Adamancipator had more cards quantity-wise get hit than Tri-Zoo. Therefore, Adamancipator lost more during the ban list than Tri-Zoo. But if we actually think about the cards that got hit, right? Well, let's start with Adamancipator. For Adamancipator, it was an Analyzer, a Roxy's, and a Sekka's Light. Well, Sekka's Light, if we look actually at we'll take a sneak peek at their breakdown. Yeah, if we look at the breakdown here, look at this. 66% of decks don't even play Sekka's Light at all. At all. Only 32% are actually playing 3 copies. That is hardly a blow to Adamancipator. That is barely a blow to Adamancipator as a whole. That is a slight blow to some of the Adamancipator decks. And even then, if the ones that are playing Sekka's Light still want to keep playing it, 2 copies versus 3 is like whatever. But honestly, I think, Called By is much better than Sekka's Light. So if you're only going to be playing 2 Sekka's Light, you might as well just replace them with 2 Called By. And honestly, I think in that regard, you're just doing yourself a bit of a favor. But yeah, so then you compare that to Fractal, which Fractal is like one of the core components of Tri-Brigade Zoodiac. It's not necessary to combo off for certain, but Fractal is our 1-card combo, and that's part of what makes Tri-Brigade Zoodiac so strong. Oh, and then also, of course, I glossed over the Roxy's and the Analyzer hits, which, yeah, are impactful. But, with Roxy's, we still have 2 copies, and we still have plenty of other level 4 non-tuner rocks to excavate into. Analyzer, we can still search it with Doki Doki if we need it during turn 1, and it's not very often that you actually need Analyzer turn 2 to combo off anyway. Whereas again, as I was touching on, Tri-Brigade Fractal is a lot more essential to the overall Tri-Brigade plan, because what makes Tri-Brigade so strong is the fact that Fractal by itself can already set up like a combo and a disruption, and that leaves you with, like, you know, the rest of your hand to have further combo pieces or disruption. I've seen a lot of people say like, oh, why don't you just replace Fractal with Foolish? Well, Foolish doesn't function by itself in the same way that Fractal does. Fractal by itself can set up 4 materials to use for a Revolt into a Shurig. Foolish only sets up 3. It's kind of like Norval into Almirage, where you have to have the Rugal die and then you can Revolt for a Shurig. Now you might be thinking, okay, so Foolish isn't that great by itself. Whatever, you can just combo with another card. But again, now we're starting to see why Fractal was so good. Fractal did not need other cards. You could have like 4 other disruption tools and a Fractal as your only combo piece, and that's still a fantastic hand, because Fractal can just combo, you know, into Rugal plus Revolt, and then you have 4 other disruption tools in your hand. That's so good. So I would consider the hits to Adamancipator and Tri-Zoo to be about equal, even though Tri-Zoo only had 1 card get hit and Adamancipator's had 3 cards get hit. Again, that's kind of what I mean when I say, you know, players' perception of what is going to be strong and what got stronger and what got weaker is not always in line with what is actually going to be the power level difference there. And of course, as the weeks go on, as we get like towards the end of Season 5, then I think we'll see the meta start to settle into a place where it's going to be more reflective of what the deck's actual power levels are. So these metagame analysis videos are actually going to be fairly interesting coming up after the ban list here. And the next one will probably be at some point after the ban list drops. I don't think I'm going to have one during the first week of Season 5, unless I see like significant shakeups, like we did last week, actually closer to a week and a half ago now by this point. Yeah, that was the last metagame. Oops, sorry, I bumped the mic wire there. Yeah, that was the last metagame analysis video we did, was when Drytron overtook, very barely mind you, but did overtake Tri-Brigade Zoodiac as the tier 1 deck. Now we look at the power levels again, and they're a little bit back more in line of where we've been seeing them for pretty much the majority of Master Duel, right? We have Tri-Brigade Zoodiac sitting pretty firmly by itself in tier 1 with a power level of 14.8. Down here in tier 2 we have Drytron with still a fairly respectable 11.6, just barely in tier 2. This was actually at tier 1 yesterday and just got bumped down when I checked, well, to make this video. So Eldlich is barely hanging into tier 2 here with a power level of 8.0. Although I will say with this ban list, or this tier list, I actually consider all of these decks to also be, I would call these all tier 2. And then I would put stuff like Bird Up, Phantom Knight, Sky Striker, IDS, and some other decks I'm probably not thinking of off the top of my head in tier 3. And even if you look here in tier 3, we are still seeing staples that we've been seeing lately, like Virtual World, Adamancipator. Of course, we always tend to see those. Prank Kids we're seeing pretty consistently now. Not too surprising to me, because 1, I knew this deck would get a lot more popular after it won the YCS, but 2, like, I honestly think Prank Kids power level is closer to 8 than where it is now at 5.5. Like, I don't know if by this standard it would be tier 2, but it would be close, I think, if it actually saw like accurate representation in the format relative to its power level. That's again what I mean by, like, you know, the decks that you're seeing on the tier list. These power rankings again are more affected by popularity than actual power level than you may think. I am honestly surprised to still see pure Tri-Brigade here, but to be fair, I am seeing more of the deck around. That could be confirmation bias after seeing it on the tier list for so long. That could actually be a, you know, indicator that it is a mainstay. And the fact that we see it here on the tier list does intend to, or does tend to indicate the latter rather than the former. So, all right, we're going to go through each individual deck breakdown. I will tell you ahead of time that there's actually not that many trend differences here, even though it's been, you know, almost a week and a half. There's not really that many new trend differences. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about how each deck will be impacted by the upcoming ban list, more than the trends of each deck. But okay, let's go ahead and get right into it with the first breakdown of Tri-Zoo here. Okay, so here we are over in Tri-Zoo land, and actually if you look at the It's funny, you don't see that many trend differences here, but if you look at the actual percentages, like, we're already seeing Fractal, seeing 3 of and 93% as opposed to the 100 it did before. So yeah, it looks like a lot of people are already starting to test their Tri-Zoo deck with 2 Fractal. I personally don't plan on testing differences until I've already climbed up as high as I want to climb during the first week of the season there. Because the first week of the season is still going to operate under the old ban list. I don't know that I want to start testing new banlist cards. Definitely not during my climb, but, you know, if I'm not doing it during my climb, when else am I going to do it for Season 5? You know, the beginning of Season 5. So it's going to be after I get to the top rank there. Is when I will start testing the differences. But yeah, I mean, we look at the rest of the percentages. We're not seeing too much different. We are seeing Gamma and Driver here represented now in Tri-Zoo, where we didn't see these before. Also, my semi-limited icon does not work all of a sudden as of the last few days. I don't really know why that is, but yeah, sorry, that's probably gonna be a little bit annoying. But unfortunately, it's a little bit annoying for me too. But in any case, yeah, so we're seeing Cyframe Gear Gamma and Driver here now in the Tri-Zoo breakdown where we didn't before. They are starting to see a bit more play here. I'm still not totally sold on them. I do understand the value of Cyframe Gear Gamma, especially to be able to negate hand traps is a very powerful tool. The way I said that was kind of funny. For me, it's mostly a matter of finding room in the main deck, not only for the Gammas, but also for the Driver. That's the main thing I don't like about Driver. It's not even just that it's a Garnet, like it's a, you know, a brick monster, a dead draw. But it's just the fact that you have to put another card in the main deck just to make this hand trap work. When I feel personally that my main deck slots are a little bit limited, I already have a bunch of things I want to try out that I don't necessarily think I have room for at the time being, that I might after the ban list changes, but I'm still working on that build at the time of recording this. Yeah, one thing I did notice here is the Nibiru. We're seeing 1 of in 39%, but then also 2 of in 34%. Basically, we're seeing see a total of 82% of decks are running at least 1 Nibiru. I think 3 is too many. I personally like 2 quite a bit, and I do think it's good that we're seeing Nibiru in the majority of Tri-Zoo decks. Because this deck can afford to play so many disruption tools, and really, I've said this a million times now, but if you're playing a set of Max C, you should probably be playing at least 1 Nibiru to punish your opponent. But, yep, good to be seeing more of that in Tri-Zoo. As far as like how the deck itself is actually going to be impacted, I did touch on this during the actual, like when we were looking over the tier list itself, but I've seen a lot of people be like, oh, it's easy, you just take out 1 Fractal and put in a Foolish and then you're done. That's all you have to change. But again, I am not personally sold on Foolish. I might still try it. I'm not saying it's a bad card in this deck. I don't think it's a bad card. But I don't think it's as easy a replacement for Fractal as I think a lot of other people might perceive it to be. Just because, again, Fractal's strength comes from being a 1-card combo. That is Fractal's main strength in this deck. Well, that and its versatility as well. But, yeah, with the Foolish, you can send Kit and then send Nerval and then search any Tri-Brigade. Let's just say Fractal. And then you summon Fractal, banish Juice, summon Bearbone, link you to Rugal, search Revolt. You might be thinking, cool, that's what you do with Fractal anyway, right? Well, but the thing is, you have 1 less Tri-type in Grave. Well, between your Grave and Banish. And as a result of that, you have to, like I mentioned earlier, you have to wait until your Rugal dies or until you somehow get another Tri-type in the Grave before you can Revolt for Shureg, which is definitely not ideal at all. It's like Revolt's strength again comes in its versatility. It's being able to flip it and get that banish whenever. But if you have that setup with Foolish Burial and nothing else, then you can't get it whenever. And like I said, yeah, sure, you could combo Foolish with other cards, but again, if we're looking to replace Fractal, I don't think this card is really like that replaceable in terms of being a 1-card combo. I don't know that we necessarily have another card like that we can just slot in. So that's why I think there is a bit more nuance than maybe some other people might realize to replacing the Fractal in this deck. And it's going to be more than just the Fractal that gets replaced, right? We have to also consider how the play rate of other decks are going to shift. Like, I expect Drytron to see much less play. Not much less, but a significant amount less of play after Ben 10 gets limited. Same with Eldlich. I expect that to see a little bit less play, not as significant as Drytron. I do expect that Tri-Zoo and Adamancipator, I think we'll see a fairly significant, not like huge, but a significantly less play. Tri-Zoo, I think we'll see a little bit less play, and then I think Virtual World will actually see an increase in play, considering it kind of got not untouched, but touched the least. Prank Kids, I think, might also see a slight increase in play for a similar reason as well. Let's see here. So in that regard, like, it might be worth, like I mentioned earlier, I think I mentioned this in a video that's coming out tomorrow, now that I think about it. But I might actually end up taking, because I've been running 2 Nibiru in my Tri-Zoo deck for a long time, I might actually drop one, depending on how impacted I think Drytron in particular is going to be by the ban list. If I think a lot of people are going to jump off the Drytron ship, then I think I might go down from 2 to 1 Nibiru. But that's also kind of going to depend on how many people I think might jump on board, like the Virtual World ship or the Prank Kid ship. I don't know. That's still kind of something I have to suss out in my head a little bit. But yeah, so that's kind of what I mean when I say that, you know, it's not as simple as just taking out Fractal and putting in Foolish. We have to consider not only the implications of that change to our deck, but the implications of what the rest of the meta is going to look like and how that will also affect changes to our deck. So yeah, I don't have a concrete build for the new ban list at this time, which is the 28th at the time I'm recording this. I've been working on it, and I'm continuing to work on it, and as soon as I have it solid, I will definitely be sharing it with you all. But okay, let's go ahead and look at the next breakdown here. Okay, so next breakdown is going to be good old Drytron. So, like I just mentioned in the Tri-Zoo breakdown, I do expect that the Drytron deck will see less play after Ben 10 gets hit to 1. I don't know if it'll see like how significantly less play it will see. I think it's mostly going to depend on, well, it's going to depend on the average player's perception of how powerful the deck is with Ben 10 only being at 1. So with Ben 10 only at 1, the deck does become quite a bit easier to disrupt. You know, before it was kind of a waste to even consider ashing the Ben 10 because they just have, you know, 3. You know, they just have so many more searches. It's so more likely that they're going to have more searches. Now, negating the Ben 10 with Ash actually becomes a somewhat viable option. Although I still think that probably, not definitely, but probably for the most part, it's still best to try to negate the Aldehyba or the Diviner, just whatever is searching the ritual spell, here we go, the Metatanas Drytron. Whatever is searching this. Because they have fewer ways to search the ritual spell as opposed to like their monsters. Although again, with Ben 10 now being at 1, that is actually not even necessarily the case anymore. I mean, it is still the case that there's, you know, more ways to search monsters than spells, but it's not. It becomes harder to search the monsters, I guess, is what I'm getting at, which is like a duh statement. Of course, it is with Ben 10 going to 1. So how powerful do I think Drytron is actually going to be with Ben 10 at 1? I could still see Drytron pretty easily being a tier 2 deck. Like, I think it would be lower tier 2 as opposed to bordering between tier 1 and 2 like it does right now. But I don't think Drytron becomes dead from Ben 10 going to 1 alone. Because we've seen, if I recall correctly, in the TCG, wasn't Ben 10 already at 1? Like, and then Eva got banned, and then now we're seeing less Drytron being played. We'll have to see how much of a problem this deck is with Ben 10 being at 1. I still suspect that Eva should probably still get hit at some point. Obviously, Konami has shown their reluctance to actually ban cards with this list. We'll have to see if that is a trend whenever the next list comes out, you know, in 3-4 months. But yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I think Drytron will still be around. I still think power level wise it'll be mid to lower tier 2. As far as how much play the deck is actually going to see, I suspect the deck towards the beginning of the release of the ban list will drop off hard right at the start. I think it'll drop right to lower tier 2, if not upper tier 3. Then I think as more people will play against it and realize that the deck has not actually become dead, then more people might start, you know, going back to it. And then maybe towards the end of Season 5, we see it a little bit closer to the, where I think it'll be like mid to lower tier 2. But I would expect, as soon as the ban list drops, to see a significant drop of this deck being played. Again, because people will perceive it as being just straight up weaker now. I guess time will tell to see if Eva does actually need to get banned or not. Again, at this time, I suspect it might still need it, but we'll see. You know, that's kind of my prediction of where Drytron's power is going to be and how much the ban list actually impacted it. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the next breakdown here. Okay, next breakdown is going to be for Eldlich, another deck that got impacted a little bit more than others by the ban list of the Conquistador going down to one copy in the deck. Now, I don't think this will actually impact the play of Eldlich that much. Like, I do expect to see Eldlich see a slight decline in play. I definitely think it'll go back down to tier 3 on our tier list here, but I suspect its power level will actually still remain around like lower tier 2. And I don't know though, actually, now that I think about it some more, it might actually be just upper tier 3 after this change. This is another change where people were just kind of like, oh, this list or this hit doesn't do anything at all. Eldlich just plays 2 more floodgates instead of conquistadors. But it's important to recognize that Conquistador has a very different role in this deck from the floodgates, right? A part of the power of Eldlich as a stun deck is that it constantly has back row, and it's constantly getting new back row. It's not just the floodgates. Now, that's kind of what people tend to gravitate more towards. They tend to be like, oh, the skill drain and the summon limit and the goes, the rivalry and the goes, and they're all so annoying. There can only be one, like, oh, these cards. But really, it's a lot more about the fact that Eldlich can just keep going into more and more and more stuff, and the main reason they're able to do that is because of their back row's abilities to banish themselves from graves to set new ones from deck. Particularly the Conquistador, not only being a trap monster, so it can be used for rank 5s and other extra deck plays. It can destroy a face-up card in the field. It can also set the Eldelixir, often the Scarlet Sanguine, which can drop another Eldlich straight from the deck, even during your opponent's turn. That's extremely powerful. And I think that contributes a lot more towards Eldlich's power than people realize. I don't know that I would argue that it's more or less than the Floodgates do, but I will say this. I actually encounter floodgates in the minority of my games I play against Eldlich, and I still have a hard time with them sometimes even without the floodgates. Now, granted, that's my personal experience, and as I've said many times before, your personal experience cannot be your only defining parameter for how strong a deck is, right? It should be about the deck's overall power level. That said, though, I don't know. Like I said, I think Eldlich will see a slight decline in play, and I think it'll see a slight power level hit as well. That I actually do, now that I think about it, expect to be more in line of where the deck actually ends up sitting. So unlike Drytron, which I think will have a bit more of a discrepancy of players' perceived power level versus actual power level, I think the players' perceived power level and actual power level of Eldlich might end up being a little bit more closely aligned. Again, I do think it is misguided to just simply think, oh, you can throw 2 floodgates in place of conquistadors. But then again, I'm not an Eldlich main, or like Eldlich isn't even one of my like offshoot decks really. I don't really ever play it, so I can't really speak as an authority for Eldlich. But maybe it is that simple. Maybe we do just throw in 2 more floodgates. That doesn't necessarily make up for what Conquistador brings to the table. But it could still be fine as a substitute. Okay, I'm trying to think, is there anything else I want to add about Eldlich here? I don't think there's a whole lot in particular. Alright, let's go ahead and move on to the next breakdown. Okay, the next deck breakdown here is going to be for Virtual Worlds, which actually managed to come out relatively unscathed from the ban list. Now, the Lao Lao did get hit to 2, and we do see that the majority of decks are playing 3, the vast majority of them. So we can't pretend that they came out, untouched. I won't make that claim. And I also have to preface this by saying that, I have not personally played Virtual World myself. I've done a little bit of research into how it's played, like from the playing aspect. Like I've looked up combo guides and stuff, because I have considered moving into the deck. So I couldn't personally tell you though just how much losing 1 copy of Lao Lao impacts the deck. But from what I've seen personally playing against it, if what I've seen other people saying, It doesn't seem like that much of a hit, honestly. It doesn't impact the main combos that Virtual World can go for as much as like losing a Fractal does for Tri-Brigade or losing a Roxy's does for Adamancipator, you know? So yeah, I think that this deck is going to be a fairly solid pick if you've got it built, or I guess even if you want to try it, you know, go for it. I think this is a very, very solid pick moving into Season 5. Because I think also a lot of people just aren't really expecting it. I don't see a whole lot of people talking about Virtual World benefiting from the list, which I don't know that it does to like a huge degree, but I do think this deck's power level does move up a little bit. Not even again from things that are changing with the Virtual World itself, but from things that are changing with other decks. Particularly Drytron. I think that deck losing steam is going to, I think, in turn allow Virtual World to climb up a little bit better. That's another thing that I don't think a whole lot of people consider when they're thinking about like how a ban list is going to affect a format. It's not just about how the list affects each deck, and it's not even just about how the list affects how much each deck is going to see play, because how much each deck sees play will then also in turn affect the decks that have, like, you know, bad matchups against it. If a deck is seeing less play, then the decks that have bad matchups against that deck are going to get a little bit better. And who knows, if those decks start to see a slight increase in play, maybe a deck that's really good right now has a bad matchup against those decks, and then that deck sees a slight decrease in play. You know, like even a ban list that seems as unimpactful as ours does, and ours is fairly relatively unimpactful, it's still going to have ripple effects, right? Every format change of any card game will have these ripple effects, and you have to be thinking about, so that's why rather you have to be thinking about not only how does the list itself directly affect decks, and not even how does the list affect players' perceptions of the decks, but how does the affected power level and perception of decks then affect the power level and perception of other decks. It's like, it's a spider web. It really is a spider web of every change affecting the other. So much so that even a whole bunch of subtle changes are going to amount into a large format shift overall. So yeah, that's just why, I don't know. That's why even though this list might seem unimpactful, I'm still actually pretty excited to see what ends up happening as a result. Just because, like, I don't know. It could be anything, you know? I don't know about anything. I think power level wise, we are still sitting. Yeah, again, I think there will be some minor changes, but early on, again, just player perception is going to affect it so much. So Virtual World, let's actually talk about the deck we're on now again for a moment. I think Virtual World's power level does increase slightly. I think this becomes a firm tier 2 deck after the ban list changes. Maybe not even necessarily upper tier 2, but at least mid tier 2. As opposed to hovering between tiers 2 and 3 like it has before. I predict that this will be a firmly tier 2 deck after the ban list changes. Now, as far as whether players will pick up on that right away, I'm not too sure. Again, from what I've seen personally on like the Discord and the subreddit, it doesn't seem like too many people are talking about moving into Virtual World come the new ban list. But again, I think over time we'll start to see the deck fall in line of where it should be, or where I think it will line up with the power level being in mid tier 2. Words are hard sometimes. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the next breakdown here. Okay, next breakdown is good old Adamancipator. Is Adamancipator my beloved? I do really like this deck actually quite a bit. Here we're actually seeing interesting trends. We're actually seeing Baron seeing much less play. Wow, that's actually really surprising to me, because it was at 80-some% last time, and now it's at 64. Huh. That's really, I've just said like 3 times now. That is really interesting to me, though. I expected this card to still see play in about 80% of Adamancipator decks, so I guess people are just not finding this card as necessary as it once was. I'd actually be really interested to see comments, your guys' takes on why the Baron went down from, like, I think it was at 82% a week and a half ago, and now it's at 64%. Like, I'm not surprised to see the decline in Herald of the Arclight and Nightmare Phoenix. That makes sense to me. But the Baron, the Baroness. Wait, it says Baroness on the card picture, but it's actually Baron. That's really weird. Okay. Yeah, the Baron de Fleur. I don't know, that's odd. So, okay. Anyway, let's talk about Adamancipator as a whole post ban list. So, I think like Drytron, I touched on this earlier. I think like Drytron, players will see that Adamancipator had the most cards hit, and you'll see, I don't think as dramatic as Drytron, but a somewhat dramatic decline in play of this deck. As far as how much I think the actual power level of this deck is affected, I think it very, very slightly went down. I still think it's a pretty solid tier 2, I guess by Master Duel meta's definition, still hovering between tier 2 and tier 3. I still think it's a solid tier 2 deck, and losing the 1 Roxy's is the most impactful hit of the deck. Makes it less likely to open it, Roxy's plus Supplier being a good opening line. Also makes it less likely to excavate into it. The Prank Kids line in general being very, very good for the deck. Even with Roxy's at 2, I still think that the Prank Kids line is still the way to go. And I actually wonder if we'll see people start to take out the Prank Kids line, because I think if enough people do that, we'll see a further decrease in Adamancipator's power level. Because I think people might think to themselves, like, oh, if we lost one of the core cards of this Prank Kids engine, let's just take it out altogether, right? No, I still don't think that's right. I still think it's definitely right to play the Prank Kids line. It's just such a solid combo extender that I can't see it. I don't know. I mean, I can see a world where we don't play it, but I don't necessarily think that's right. So I think if enough people are taking out the Prank Kids line, then I think we might see more of a decrease of this deck power level than might be the actual case. Again, like I said, I think this deck will lose a slight bit of power, but overall will not move too far from where it is on the tier list right now, which again right now is hovering between tiers 2 and 3, although again I think it's pretty firmly tier 2. The Sekka's Light, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, 66% of decks don't even play this card at all, so I think that card, I don't know, I don't think that hit is impactful really in the slightest, to be quite honest. That semi-limit actually hurts Danger Kaiju, like, way more than it hurts Adamancipator. Danger Kaiju, as far as I know, pretty much always plays Sekka's Light. So for that card to lose a copy, or for that deck to lose a copy of that card, definitely more impactful than against Adamancipators here. So I still think also that the Miracle Rupture line is probably still not the way to go. I'm not a fan of that card. Foolish Burial I could see myself adding because it can send the Block Dragon. I could see myself adding a Foolish Burial. I haven't 100% decided just yet if I'm going to. But Miracle Rupture, I'm not a huge fan of that card. I haven't tried it, to be fair, but I don't really see it being that good, to be quite honest. I've also seen people suggest Rock Band Xeno Guitar quite a bit. I might be willing to try it out, but at this time, I don't currently have any plans to play it. I do understand where the card is really good. I just think those situations are a little bit too niche. It's like borderline, really. I'm borderline about trying Rock Band Xeno Guitar, but borderline falling on the, not trying it side of the line. So that's where I'm at with it right now. Yeah, I think that about covers Adamancipator, or at least everything I wanted to say about Adamancipator. Let us move on to Prank Kids, I believe is next. Alright, Prank Kids. One of my new favorite decks. I love this deck. I don't have a whole lot to say about it right now, though. There are not that many, new upward or downward trends. Looking at the percentages, those haven't really moved a whole lot. Yeah, and in all honesty, this deck really didn't get impacted by the ban list at all. Well, I mean, Roxy's went to 2, but as we're seeing, 71% of builds already only play 2 Roxy's, so we all know that was an Adamancipator hit. It was not a Prank Kids hit. Now, I do expect the power level of Prank Kids to rise slightly. I think Prank Kids should be like a firmly tier 2 deck, like firmly in the middle of tier 2 is where I think Prank Kids power level is. But even before, these ban list changes, we were already seeing, in my opinion, an underrepresentation of Prank Kids here in Master Duel. I think the reason that Prank Kids is like towards the bottom of tier 3 right now, excuse me, Sorry about that. I think the reason that Prank Kids is towards the bottom of tier 3 right now is because just not as many people were playing it as I think, not necessarily should. It's not like people need to be playing Prank Kids. Like, I don't think that's necessarily the case, but I think if more people played Prank Kids, then it would see enough of an increase of success in play that it would affect the power level and cause it to rise. So I'm not really sure where Prank Kids are going to sit as far as what people's perception of them is going to be after the ban list. I do expect that over time we will gradually see more and more people play Prank Kids, because Prank Kids plus the adventure engine is very, very good. And obviously people realize that after the YCS, where Prank Kids with the adventure engine had a huge showing. So I think as time goes on and as we get closer to the adventure engine being released here in Master Duel, we will slowly start to see an increase of play in Prank Kids, and as a result, a slow increase of play in its power level. However, again, like I said, especially after this ban list, I do think Prank Kids' actual power level is like mid tier 2, as opposed to tier 3 where it's been for quite a while now. Yeah, like I said, there's not really that many changes to Prank Kids as far as the deck itself goes with the ban list, and even with, you know, the list affecting all these other decks and then affecting how you might build these other decks. Like, if you were playing multiple Nibiru, you might go down to 1 now. Actually, am I playing 1 or 2? I don't even remember off the top of my head. That's bad. I should know that. But, I mean, that's just about the only change I could really see making as far as, like, tech options or disruption tools. I don't think Prank Kids' build as a whole will be too affected by the meta shifts here. Okay, let's take one last look at the pure Tri-Brigade deck, and then we will call it after that. So pure Tri-Brigades, I mentioned it briefly, but I have actually started to see more and more of this deck on ladder. Ever since it started getting showcased on the tier list here on Master Duel Meta, which, you know, go figure. Yeah, you know, I've talked about it before, but sometimes it's the ban list, or the ban list, I keep saying that. It's the tier list itself that can actually influence how much decks see play. And I think now that pure Tri-Brigade is something that's on more people's radars, more and more people are more inclined to try it out. So, what do I think about pure Tri-Brigade following the ban list? I do think it ends up taking a bit more of a hit than Tri-Brigade Zoodiac, because obviously Tri-Brigade Zoodiac can at least fall back on the Zoo line, and by using the Zoodiac monsters has combo lines that don't involve Fractal that pure Tri-Brigade does not have access to. Now, pure Tri-Brigade does still have Rescue Cat, which is still, you know, obviously a very, very powerful combo tool, but it is also a very easily disruptible one. I think that, given the fact that it's also an ultra rare, is kind of why it's not as popular as, you know, pure, or not pure, Jesus, as Tri-Brigade Zoodiac. So, I don't know. I do think this deck does still get hurt a little bit more, though, because it tends to be slightly more reliant on Fractal, just due to the nature of how the deck is built as opposed to Tri-Zoo. The difference is slight, though. I do have to emphasize that. All in all, I expect we'll probably see pure Tri-Brigade fall off of the tier list after the ban list, as I think both it and Tri-Zoo will overall see a slight decrease in play. I think it will be probably enough that we don't see any more pure Tri-Zoo on the tier list. That's not to say it'll be a bad deck by any means. I still think it's a pretty firm, like, honestly, probably borders between tier 2 and tier 3, if I'm being totally honest, but it's probably closer to tier 3. But I still think it'll be a solid deck. If you really want to play it over the Zoodiac variant, I still think it'll be a solid deck following the ban list, but as always, as I said before, I tend to think the Zoodiac variant is just better in enough ways that I would rather just play it over the pure variant there. Alright, let's look one last time at the old tier list before we sign off here. Alrighty guys, so that is going to do it for our Season 4 metagame analysis, or Season 4 wrap-up here. Yeah, like I said, I have thought about doing these on a more weekly basis, but now I'm kind of starting to think, because, you know, this whole week it's kind of more or less looked like this. I mean, Drytron's kind of been bouncing between tier 1 and tier 2, as again, its power level hovers very close to 12, but, you know, for the most part, I still think it's probably, like, well, I guess, I don't know, with the ban list upcoming, it probably will still end up being weekly, because that will be how often we'll be seeing, like, major shifts on the tier list here. Yeah, I definitely expect to see quite a few more metagame analysis videos as the ban list comes up. We'll be talking about how the changes are actually shaping the meta, and then kind of comparing and contrasting that with the theorizing we've done in this video. Again, at this point, there likely won't be a new metagame analysis video until after the list has been live for at least a day or two. Unless we see significant shakeups during the first week of the new season. Then I might throw out a quick metagame analysis, but even that would just be for that week. You know, it wouldn't even be an appropriate analysis moving forward. So we'll probably see the next one a little bit after the ban list goes live. And even then, that one will be a little bit like, you know, the list just went live, so this is going to be people's immediate reactions, but not necessarily where the decks are going to settle. Again, I think we'll have to wait until, at the earliest, the end of Season 5 to see where everything settles after all is said and done. Alright guys, as always, thank you for watching to the very end of the video like this. I greatly appreciate that. And I'm also especially appreciative if you're commenting and subscribing as well. I really like to see the comments on these metagame analysis videos because I like to see everybody's takes of the you know, trends and the percentages and the breakdowns and the tier lists, and just seeing everyone's opinion of what it all means. I've said this before, but I really like these metagame analysis videos because it's just me doing what I would normally do anyway, which is browsing Master Duel meta every now and then, looking at the tier list, looking at each of the breakdowns, and being like, okay, how is this affecting the metagame? So to be able to introduce you guys all into this this little ritual of mine as well has been very helpful in helping me analyze more appropriately what the actual implications of all these changes mean. So I have to thank you, as always, for your help with that, and just in general. You guys are so very awesome, and I appreciate you all. But, alright, I'm talking in circles now like I always do at the end of these videos, so I'm just going to end it off here. Thank you very much for watching. This is Eldlich, signing out, and I hope you have a fantastic day.